Shiny, happy people. REM here on Democracy Now! Breaking with Convention, War, Peace, and the Presidency. We're broadcasting live from St. Paul. I'm Amy Goodman. Well, he won't be getting a headlining speech, though he does discuss headlines. One of the most influential figures at the Republican National Convention this week, former White House Deputy Karl Rove. He's in the Twin Cities to rally Republicans behind the scenes and appear on air as a contributor to Fox News. Since leaving the White House, Rove's continued to play a significant role in Republican Party politics. He's rumored to have intervened to prevent Senator John McCain from selecting independent Senator Joe Lieberman as his running mate. That's according to Politico. Well, Rove's name also continues to come up in the case of the former Democratic governor of Alabama, Don Siegelman. Siegelman's currently free on bond while he appeals a conviction on corruption charges. Critics say he's the target of a political witch hunt that many say was directed by Karl Rove. I sat down with Don Siegelman at Free Speech TV last week in Denver at the Democratic-Republican convention and asked Siegleman to talk about his journey from the governor's mansion to a jail cell.
I was convicted of something that has never been considered a crime in America, and that is appointing a contributor to a non-paying, all-volunteer board. In this case, it was a CEO of a Fortune 500 company who had supported my effort to bring free college education to all of Alabama's high school kids. He had served on this same board through 3 previous governors, 2 Republicans and 1 Democrat. The New York Times has said multiple times this has never been considered a crime in America. It was interesting when 60 Minutes did an expose on this case that they interviewed the former Attorney General, Republican Attorney General from Arizona, who said that the Republicans couldn't beat Siegleman fair and square, so they targeted him with this prosecution. I was investigated by Karl Rove's client, the Attorney General of Alabama. My opponent, Republican opponent's campaign manager's wife, was the U.S. attorney who brought me to trial 1 month before the election. It's interesting to note that her husband is a political operative from New York, a Republican who was Bush's special assistant.
Who is that?
His name is Bill Canary. Canary has a long, long history in the Republican Party. He was chief of staff of the NRC. He was a deputy to Andrew Card. He was in charge of the ground troops in the Bush Quayle campaign in '92. He was someone that Time magazine said he was a political paratrooper who was dropped in states where something needed to be fixed, and another magazine quoted saying that he was a person who couldn't tolerate Democrats at any level. But after the '92 campaign, he and Rove, who had been friends for a long time, came to Alabama, both married women from Alabama. Rove built his home on the Gulf Coast, where he still lives today. They ran a number of campaigns out of the state of Alabama, and I did battle with them when they came to steal their first election for the state Supreme Court in 1994, and again in '96 and '98 we did battle with Rove and his bag man Jack Abramoff, who started running Indian casino money into the state, laundering it through Ralph Reed to defeat me in '98.
Abramoff, who's in jail now.
Abramoff, same guy, yeah. And Ralph Reed ran $13 million of Indian casino money into Alabama to defeat me in '98, to defeat my lottery proposal, which was going to give free college education to our kids in '99.
Ralph Reed, a big fundraiser now for John McCain.
Yeah, these national TV hosts who have been running and laundering money, documented, oddly enough, by John McCain himself when he did his report to Congress entitled "Give Me 5," which meant "Give me 5 million." And all of this is documented in the McCain report to Congress. And then they again ran Indian casino money in through the Christian Coalition and the Republican National Committee and the Republican Governors Association in 2002. In 2002, my election was actually, I won on election night, only to wake up to find that there had been a, quote, computer glitch. 5,200 votes of mine were given to my opponent overnight, and the 2 people who either took credit or who were given credit was Karl Rove's partner, a woman named Kitty McCullough, and another man, Dan Gans, who later went to work for a Jack Abramoff, Tom DeLay-related company called the Alexander Strategy Group. But back to my prosecution. After the trial, a Republican lawyer who had been hired by this group, she says by Rove and Bill Canary.
Her name?
Her name is Dana Jill Simpson, a woman I had never met until I got out of prison. She said that she was hired to do negative research on me, and she has given sworn testimony to the House Judiciary Committee to this effect, and that on a telephone conversation when they were talking about how to get rid of Siegleman, in fact, they described me as a cockroach who will never die. My prosecutor's husband said, look, stop worrying about Siegleman. I've talked to, Rove has talked to the Department of Justice, and we're going to take care of him. Just forget about him. Well, later, the prosecutions of the two U.S. attorneys started. One who's a close friend of, social friend of Rove's, who actually studied 5 years under Hickman Ewing, who was the lead prosecutor in the Whitewater. They pursued Clinton for 7 years.
Who was that prosecutor?
Her name is Alice Martin.
And the other?
The other is Laura Canary, Bill Canary's wife. The gentleman that I described earlier as having this long Republican pedigree of political operations for the Republican Party. I was, when I was sentenced, my sentence was enhanced because I refused to stop speaking out about the political nature and the political origins of this prosecution.
Who was the judge in your case?
I've been instructed by my lawyers not to discuss the judge, so we'll just leave it at that if you don't mind. But the judge said that I was corrupting the executive branch of government because I was accusing the executive branch of selective prosecution, which of course Time magazine also did an expose agreeing with me that it was selective prosecution. After sentencing, I was immediately handcuffed, shackled, and I was taken out of the courtroom without even having a chance to turn around and see my wife, much less say goodbye to my family. I was taken to a maximum security prison, put in solitary confinement. Where? In Atlanta, which is the worst federal prison in America. It was built in the late 1800s. And I stayed in prison a total of 9 months until I was released by what I think is an extraordinary ruling by the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals.
Not just in Atlanta. You were then moved around the country.
Oh, yeah, I was flown to New York, Michigan, Oklahoma, and I stayed in solitary confinement in Oklahoma for a while, and then to Oakdale, Louisiana, the swamps of Louisiana.
You were taken out of Atlanta in the middle of the night?
About 3 o'clock in the morning.
All because of being convicted on this charge that what they say was you took a bribe, giving a position on a state board to a businessman named Richard Screshy, who had made a contribution of $250,000 to a lottery.
Education lottery fund. It's also interesting to note that this guy had been a big Republican contributor, and he switched. And he started supporting me in my effort to give free college education to these kids, and that was when his troubles began too. It's really a pitiful story.
He in jail?
He is still in prison, and I have to tell you this story. I mean, I called him and asked him to serve on that board, and he said, "Oh, Governor, do I have to?" He said, I've been on that board for years. He said, I just resigned. I don't want to be on the board. And I said, do this for the state because you're a prominent businessman. You've served 3 governors. I want you to serve me. And this poor guy is still in prison.
Doug Jones, one of your lawyers, said Mr. Bailey, who was your aide, had indicated there had been a meeting with Governor Siegelman and Mr. Screshy, a private meeting in the governor's office, just the 2 of them. Then, as soon as Mr. Screshy left, the governor walked out with a $250,000 check that he said Screshy had given him for the Lottery Foundation. Scott Pelley of CBS, who did the expose, said had the check in his hand right there and then, had the check in his hand right there and then. According to Bailey's testimony, Screshy had just handed it to him. And that's right, showed it to Mr. Bailey. Nick asked him, well, what does he want for it? And Siegleman allegedly said a seat on the con board. Nick asked him, can we do that? And you, Don Siegelman, Jones said, I think so.
Now, the problem with it was that the check was not signed by Richard Screshy, and the check was